Welcome to the Payment Shed podcast, the weekly podcast that dives into the big topics, trends, and people shaping the worlds of payments, fintech, and business leadership, with your two co-hosts, myself, Grant Evans, and Justin Hanna. Welcome to another episode of the Payment Shed podcast. Today we're joined by Dwayne Gefferie, founder at Gefferie and payment strategist. Welcome, Dwayne. We have working microphones for you this time.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Always great to be back.
Yeah, long-time friend of the show, obviously. We had a bit of a technical issue in Amsterdam last time we tried to do this, so we're back to give it another go. Thanks for coming in. Please do introduce yourself.
Absolutely. Well, my name is Dwayne Gefferie. Nowadays, I'm a payment strategist. I think I'm going to hyphen that and just sort of start adding data scientists to it as well, because for the last 23 years, I've done everything from the data side, from data analyst all the way to VP of Data Science and Analytics, ran a data science and analytics consultancy firm. But nowadays, I spend most of my time really diving deep into payments companies, what's happening within payments, and trying to make that much more digestible. One, through my LinkedIn content, which has grown quite significantly, and two, to my newsletter, the Payment Strategy Breakdown, where I sort of like always try to take very complex topics and break them down for the audience. We have well over 7,000 people now subscribed to it, so that's where I spend my time. And other than that, I advise a lot of different payment startups as well. And from time to time, I take on some bigger consulting jobs, as building like a new neobank or trying to help a company really revolutionize their data strategy and really figure things out.
And you've founded companies in the past, and you've built this reputation in as a beacon of knowledge in AI and data particularly. But what started you on that entrepreneurial journey to kind of step away from being employed? You've worked for Adyen and payments companies such as that. Like what was the thing that triggered you to go, do you know what, I'm going to go and do this on my own?
Yeah, so it actually started way earlier, right? I'm one of those who at an early stage was always trying to figure out a way to make a couple of extra bucks, right? In the beginning was to buy some candy or anything like that. And I think it was 15 when I started my first company, which was actually an entertainment company where we were organizing high school events, but we called it multi-high school events. So everybody from all the different high schools would come, and we would just rent out a club and got some DJs, and that became a business. And I ran that for about 3 years before I sold it. Then I started a marketing company, sold that when I was 21. Then I even had a Domino's Pizza. So I had a lot of different entrepreneurial things throughout the years. And my payments career has always been parallel to that. So it's always been entrepreneurial and having a steady job or a corporate job and stuff. And I think all of that sort of like merged and came to an end when I left checkout.com back in 2018, 2019 and set up Databrite. And that sort of like got everything together and then spent most of my time now. So it's been ever since 2019 that I've been fully just entrepreneurial, not working at a company, just having my own company and not doing that. But it was the merging of those two paths into that one. And that's what I continue to do now.
So lots of different industries there. And obviously it sounds like success in most of them, which is great. What do you think is the kind of the biggest challenge you found as a founder, kind of doing it on your own?
I think the biggest challenge for me is always, one, it's finding great partners, right? And I think nowadays I would probably be much more critical and much more skeptical of who I get into business with. Because at that time, it's who's your best mate, who's the best friend, who came up with the idea, right? And then you divide, the stock 50-50 and you say, let's just go for it, only to figure out that you have the same skill set, or you have, you're not able to divide work the right way, or you clash on certain things like when the money actually comes in and how should we invest it and how should we reinvest it? Should we hire people? Should we grow the business, or should we pay ourselves a bigger dividend and stuff? So I think that's probably one of the most critical things within that I found.
And how's your perspective developed over time when you think about building businesses?
Well, I think this sounds a little bit philosophical. No, not philosophical, but I think the thing that really changed for me is that what am I trying to achieve in the long run, right? So 5 to 10 years down the road. I think now I'm much more at a place where, yes, I could go and build a massive company, raise a lot of money, go at it and just really hunker down and stuff. But I always said, like, okay, is this what I would truly want to do? Is it making me happy? Am I enjoying it? I now currently enjoy being able to have a lot of freedom, to read a lot of stuff, to talk to a lot of different people, to not feel like the other side is saying, well, we can't share information with him because he might, take it and put it into his own business. So I like that part where I'm just much more free and I can do a lot of things. So I call myself a solo founder, solo advisor, solo consultant, because I don't want anybody to have that perception that I'm trying to take anything away from them. I want to give as much, right? So through my writing, everything that I do, most of the things that I do are actually for free, and that creates the opportunities. Whereas, if you would build something and go raise capital, you're hunkered down, you're focused on that, and a lot of those opportunities disappear. So for me, it's really about, what do I enjoy? Is it giving me happiness? Am I able to combine things like travel and meeting people and networking and creating content and all of those other things? And does that fulfill me and stuff? And I'm definitely at a point where I'm like, it's great, but there's definitely more, but I don't have to rush it.
Nice. Now, not a day goes by where I don't see something around AI or data across the industry. In the payment and fintechs world, when we speak to businesses, from your perspective, where do you see AI having the biggest immediate impact in payments right now?
I think it's productivity, right? I think we look at what some of the bigger companies are doing, and what you're seeing, of course, is they're doing amazing things. Like, oh, we have a foundational model, and we can connect every data point from the browser all the way to settlement and stuff. But if you go look at it, a lot of those companies were on that journey 10 years ago, right? I started many of those journeys. When I was at Adyen, we had a PostgreSQL database, and I came up with a lot of those things where I had a lot of resistance. A lot of people were saying like, well, it is all about data, but we don't need to, get data bricks and all these other things in there. We just need to take it one step at a time. But those companies have had 10 years to build on top of that, and, brought in smarter people and engineers and other people to come into that. But I think what we're seeing right now is just that, yes, AI is everywhere, but productivity is probably the first thing to do. It's, do you want to give your staff, do you want to give the people that you're working with AI as a productivity tool? Why? Because if within the company we can actually say, hey, if I'm writing emails, if I'm making proposals, if I'm doing a presentation, I can do all of that. But there are simple tools. I can use a Gamma for my presentation. I don't have to spend the next 3-4 hours making a presentation because I have a meeting tomorrow, right? You can get a lot of productivity back by enabling that. And I think that's the first level. Go look at your engineers as well. I love, like, I'm not really a developer, but I'm a data scientist who done a lot of, I programmed in R, which was a statistical language, which was more about numbers, Python as well, but I've never really developed production level code that got published and stuff. But now with ChatGPT or Codex or with Cursor and their cloud code, what you're seeing now is that even somebody like me who has the product mindset, who has the data science mindset, who knows how to work with data, I can come up with little things that I can create as little MVPs. They might not still be production ready, but instead of just having my ID sit there or having to write out a document and having to convince everybody, I can spend much more time on developing an MVP in a much shorter time frame by really being very focused and just giving it and then presenting that and saying, hey, this is my ID and this is my MVP for it. And there you go. And if people then like it, we say, okay, let's develop this into an actual thing. So I think that will create more productivity with the product people, and then the engineers, let them enjoy or let them use a co-pilot. Like, it doesn't matter if it's Microsoft or Cloud Code or Codex or anything like that. That's the first level. If we get a little bit of more productivity out of the people that we have, that's where it's going to start. And then all of the other things will just be, compounding on that will be the next steps that we can go into.
Do you think most financial institutions are still underutilizing the data that they have at their fingertips, and is AI helping them to unlock some of that additional data that maybe has been neglected previously to drive more value? To, I did a roundtable with a load of CFOs recently, and they were talking about how they use AI to help in their world. And you've got merchant application stuff, you've got obviously optimization of authorization rates, but like, is enough being done with that data still at this moment in time, or is there a lot further we can go?
I think there's a lot further than we can go, absolutely, because like I said, like, for some companies, it's been a 10-year journey into doing that, right? That first foundation is actually saying, are we capturing enough data? And this might sound like, well, we already have so much data, but are you capturing enough? A lot of the companies that I've worked with, when I was doing a lot of this consulting, we were doing a lot of on-premise into the cloud. And sometimes I had to break it all the way down to what we call events, right? Like the actual log events that were happening. And what we were noticing is that sometimes 60, 70, 80% of that data was being discarded, right? We were only taking like key variables and then putting those into the database. But a lot of it was in the event log data. So at my times, I was always trying to figure out what is actually that data that we're not utilizing. Can we put that into a database? I went through that journey at Adyen. I went through that journey at a company called Dimebox, where we were doing this for other parties. I was doing that at checkout.com. And I believe that a lot of companies are still discarding a lot of that data. One, because they don't always own their own technology stack. So they're getting it from a third party, and that third party is like, this is all you need, but you don't know what's the raw data that I'm getting from a MasterCard or from a Visa or from an APM. So I think that first step is you need to take control, not just of your data, but also of that log data, and then go figure that out. And now with all of these machine learning capabilities that we have, and the fact that if you're in the cloud, you can go and say, give me all that raw data, give me the petabytes of data, and now let me go figure out if there's things within that data that can actually make sense that we can help and optimize with. So I think that's the first foundation, really getting control of your data, understanding how much data is actually there, and should you enrich it, right? Should you be getting more browser-based data? Should you be getting more log data in there?
But we hear this all the time, right? And I, especially over the last few months, is let's just get the AI to increase our conversion. And like you mentioned before, optimize authorization rates. Like it's just this thing that you switch on and all of a sudden you can increase your acceptance rates. And I was actually having a conversation this morning with a guy whose boss said to him, right, let's get that AI and then we can increase conversion and we can charge our customers a little bit more. That was the exact conversation he had.
But are they being missold though? Like there's so many AI companies out there, they're making it seem like it's so easy just to plug them in and it solves every problem you could ever imagine. Right?
Like Visa, MasterCard probably would have been looking at this already if we could just remove certain decline codes to increase conversion just like that.
I think for me, it's more of an enabler for the orchestration layers that already exist and how they probably route traffic and do that in a smart way, because, you know, we've got this economy now where, you know, smaller merchants than previously would have had multiple payment relationships, right? Because they've got the ability to do that through orchestration platforms now. And that for me seems like the greatest foundation point for utilizing AI that says this transaction originated here. We know we get a better success rate from the specific issuer with this acquirer, whatever it might be. But like building that kind of flow into the payment ecosystem seems like a positive way to go. From. It'd be good to get your take on orchestration platforms more broadly.
Really, data science, isn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I think the first step that everybody needs to understand is that every single company that's involved within payments, the issuer, the acquirer, the PSP, the fraud engines, because you're building technology and you're hopefully adding value to whatever that chain is, you're building your own code, you're building your own software, and that creates, you know, the byproduct of that is data. And what happens is that all of those companies have their own databases and they store all of that database. So a lot of them are seeing that as their moat. This is our moat, right? This is what makes us special. But because everything is actually in data silos, you never fully get the 360 picture. You never get the full story. So what you're seeing right now, and like MasterCard just launched like their payments optimization platform, which is interesting because they're saying we have data that if we share that with you, you can make better decisions. So you have the likes of an Adyen or a WorldPay or a NeoPay or those guys. They're collaborating because they're like, oh, a little bit more extra information will help us to boost it up. The numbers look great, 9 to 15%. I'm like, okay, that's truly amazing. But then look at all of those other points where is data being left behind or created that's in those data silos. So when a company says, hey, we should just plug this in, what you're basically saying is we have our own way, and hopefully we're doing that in the best possible way to get as much optimization as possible. But it is true that if we can combine that with other sources of data and we can hopefully provide some smart AI capabilities, machine learning, whatever you need to do to then boost that authorization rate, that's where you're going to get the benefit. But we're also in a space where everybody's competing with each other. We're trying to be much more friendly. We're trying to create some partnerships, but people are still combining that. And it's also your own merchant portfolio, right? Your base of what you have is going to be different than the setup of the next company and the other companies. So doesn't matter what works for them. You still have to figure out what works for you. And that's what you need to focus on.
For it to be truly transformative, for AI to really, really do its job over the next kind of 4 or 5 years, what's the one thing you would say it needs to be able to do?
Standardization. I think standardization for me is probably the key, right? And it's something that everybody keeps on avoiding. Is that one? Like even this, like I'm having a lot of conversations around payments protocols, and you have different companies coming up with different protocols, approaching different things, especially in the agentic commerce part. But if you go back 20, 30 years ago, the way that transactions are being processed online as well as through the terminals are all based on ISO protocols that have actually defined the standards within the industry. Doesn't matter if it's card-based, banking, bank transfers, ACH, all of those different things. But what we're now getting to is a place where everybody's, again, very protective of their own data and the way that they look at data and how they categorize data. So a lot of the conversations that I'm having with especially young startups is saying, look, you need to unify that data. You need to create your own modeling layer on top of it to say, I know what this company is saying, which is the same as this company. They just have different names for it, or they just have a different format from it. So I think there should be a place where we can say, hey, can we create more standards that everybody adopts to, right? So that if we do get orchestrators or we get other companies who are infusing or taking that data to themselves, they don't have to spend the next time figuring out how to extract, transform, load it, and match it with other things before we can even get the value out of it. So I think standardization across the industry, just from a terminology perspective, the way that we're labeling data and what we can do with it would benefit everybody, because then we can all get not just the productivity, but also the insights that we're all looking for.
And what are the biggest misconceptions that people have about AI and fintech at the moment, in your opinion?
I think that it's going to be plug and play, right? I think that if we really look at the research that large companies are doing, like the McKinseys, the BCGs, right? All of them, of course, are trying to convince the fintechs and the financial service companies and the payments companies to adopt AI. What we're seeing is that the conversations are definitely taking place on a C level, right? I think 70, 80, 90% numbers is what I've seen of people saying AI is going to have this transformational impact on payments or on financial services. But then you go look at what's actually happening, and it's only at a very low level, 3, 4, 5% of companies actually adopting that. So I think that's where we need to get to a level where we say, okay, it's great to have the conversation, but again, are you in a place where you can actually apply AI on your business, right? Are you there? Are you in a place where your data is stored properly? Do you have that in a data warehouse? You can't do it on everything all at the same time, but what's a use case that you can tackle with AI right now? Is it onboarding? Is it compliance, right? What are some of the simple things that you can have so that you can convince the rest of the company this is working, and this is how we continue to go forward? But I also think that the biggest challenge within that, and to give credit to a lot of the C-levels, is that we're in an industry where we have so much regulation around us that it is not as easy to be plug and play. But the pitch to us from the AI companies is that it's plug and play. Just plug in this LLM, just plug in this little AI model, and we'll be fine. And that's not the case. You need to really be careful about how you build things out, how you leverage the data, and deal with all of the regulatory things, from a GDPR, from a PCI to all of those standards that you really have to work with, so that you're allowed to work with that data and actually get those type of insights.
And there are risk factors that you mentioned there, obviously. Are there sort of ethical concerns that exist with AI as well, that particularly payments companies and fintechs need to bear in mind when they're telling their end customers, hey, we're using AI?
Well, no big ethical things come to mind for me, right? I think, of course, everybody's making a lot of statements now, right? This much uplift, and we're doing this, and we're protecting you, and all of those other things. And there's nobody out there verifying or checking if that's actually true.
But in a data sense, right? Because people are precious about their data, particularly in the UK, right? We have a real thing about sharing our data, our information, and financial information is an even more taboo thing, right? Like, what are you doing with my card details, right? My bank details, all that sort of thing. If you're then saying, well, we're letting AI access this because it can do this, this, and this, and help you get better rates here and do this, but you're ultimately sharing that data with something that there is a bit of distrust about for certain people.
Absolutely. And I think companies should definitely be much more forward about sharing how they're doing that. I think we're getting into the space where proprietary models and all of those other things are overlapping now with open source, right? Like, hey, we should have this open source. I still think that a lot of people might not necessarily understand what's going on there, but you do have people who do understand it, who can explain it and can share what that is. Yeah, I think for me, that question has always been very challenging because it's who actually owns the data, right? Like when you do a transaction and you're tapping your card details, we have things like tokenization, anonymization, pseudo-anonymization, all of those different things that are protecting us because we have the things like the GDPRs and the PCIs of the world protecting us. But then at the end of the day, we're all looking for that result. If I'm doing a payment, if I have the funds or I have the credit available, I want the transaction to go through if it's me. Then there's the obligation from the merchant and the process to make sure that fraud doesn't happen or that I'm protected against that fraud. So I'm always very, who owns that data? I think once you tap it, it's a collaborative thing. You should share that information. You can have terms and conditions. You should, from time to time, maybe educate the audience and the consumers on what that needs to be. But I think we all need to see what are we trying to achieve, and as long as we're trying to achieve that and we're open about how we're achieving that, I think with AI you just open up this another conversation, is that the more AI you apply, the more it becomes this black box that we need explainable AI to explain what is actually happening, and I think that just becomes a challenge on itself.
It feels like sometimes with AI that people don't fully know how to use it just yet, right? So we're like, here's all this AI, and that's probably then a risk because people don't know what to do with it. And then you mentioned before, so people are maybe not using it properly. So you've got 100% of people that have been given the ability to use AI, but only 5% are using it correctly. The risk then, as you mentioned, from an ethical perspective, is the other 95% may be using it in the wrong way. And that's then why we need standardization, really, is to make sure that there is a level playing field, to make sure that no one's kind of overstepping the mark with the data that we don't really even know exists just yet.
The Payment Shed podcast is proudly sponsored by Tammy AI, the market intelligence and lead generation platform built for sales and marketing teams who want precision, not guesswork. Tammy helps businesses identify their best fit prospects, gain deep market insights, and boost revenue growth. And it really has become the go-to solution for the payments and fintech industries. Both Justin and I have used the tool in previous organizations that we've been in, and we really can't recommend it highly enough. There's a link in the bio to click on the Tammy website and find out more about their product. You really won't regret it.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing now, or the way that I'm looking at AI and how it's getting into the consumer's hand, right? So I think if we look at companies who are succeeding on the consumer side of it, like for me, OpenAI is probably one of the best examples, like especially the launch of Sora, right? Where there used to be a time that if you wanted to have, you had a creative ID, right? It was very difficult to bring that to life because even if you wanted to make a movie or you wanted to make something, it was like, oh, I got to go get a production. I got to go get cameras. I got to do all of these different things. I think what we're now seeing is that the consumer side of it, doesn't matter if it's a ChatGPT or a Claude or a Sora, is that whatever I can think of, whatever that idea is, whatever I want to create from a text perspective, from an image perspective, from a video perspective, we're putting AI in the hands of consumers who are saying, I can get my IDs, my productivity, all of those things I can put in there and it comes out of it. I don't know how it works, but I know that the end result is something that I'm really interested in and I definitely want to do more, right? Like even me, like I've been going down this rabbit hole of AI music. I love music. And for me, it's that I've found a couple of channels who are taking certain aspects of music and creating new AI music. And I think it's fascinating that I even like the songs. I'm like, this should be an actual song. So I think a lot of consumers are consuming it in that way. It's like, hey, it's doing something for me. I'm not going to judge it. I think we still need to have those people who are going to be critical of that. What am I putting in? Is that being protected? Who's auditing the AI companies not to misuse it in that particular way? But we're also getting insights that we've never seen about the creativity and the things that people do want to see. And I think that's sort of like a a continuous conversation, but also something where we just need to make sure that maybe we need ethical standards. Maybe we need to have somebody govern it.
But is regulation actually keeping pace with the speed at which AI is developing? Because, you know, you talk about auditing it and managing it in that way, but if the regulation can't keep up, then we're heading into a slightly grey area, right?
Yeah, so I think what you're seeing now is that the AI companies are trying to, like, I think Anthropic is really one of those companies who's like, we're ethical, right? Like, they're really pushing that as in going, the research is ethical and stuff. And I think, you know, we've seen times where we've looked at the big companies like the FANG, right? The Facebook, the Amazons and all of those. And we've looked at it and said, like, they're just doing everything for a profit and they're trying to get to that point. So, of course, what we would perceive as ethical, they're not doing at this point. I think at this level, because AI is going at such a rapid pace, they need to be as transparent as possible, publish models, publish that research. I think a lot of them are doing that. Then we need to have people who are actually reading that and providing commentary on that and pushing back on it. But I don't think that it needs to be, I don't think we need to over-regulate it, because especially in Europe, we see that we're stifling innovation by regulating things before they even happen, right? Something comes out, we have to regulate it. And I think we need to find a better way of working together between regulation and ethics and the innovation of the companies. But I think AI is moving at such a pace that doesn't matter what type of regulation you want to throw at it, it's not going to be able to keep up at the moment.
Yeah, and by the time you kind of got that regulation, AI is already ahead of it, right?
Yeah.
And then we're going to end up using AI to help us build out and create a standard on how we use AI. Right? So
Absolutely.
it's kind of that chicken egg situation. So we talk about obviously your experience, Dwayne, when it comes from being a founder and living that founder life. Kind of in your journey, kind of what's been your proudest moment, do you think, as a founder?
Ooh, I think for me, my proudest moment is getting up every time I fall down. So I think whenever you talk about being a founder or having set up different companies, I'm definitely not at a level where I'm like, oh, you know, guys, I'm fully done. I'm retired. I'm a billionaire. Nowhere near that, right? I make mistakes every single day. I don't invest in the companies that I should have invested in. I don't stick with things for the longest period of time. I'm great at starting up things and trying to figure out that 0 to 1. I love that particular space. But I've been a part of companies who are now worth 30, 40, $50 billion and stuff. So I have a nose for it as in where that's going, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm successful. But I think for me, what I'm most proud of is that even when things get hard, or even when things fall down, or even when you fail at something, and failure can be different things, right? I can have a company, we've made a lot of money, but somebody else did it and they've made 100 times more money. It's like, have I failed? No, I've been successful at my own thing, but it's not giving up. I think even at this point is that I've sold my previous company and I'm still winding down a lot of different things around it, but I don't feel like I've succeeded in life or within business. So I always feel like even though I consider that a success, it could have been more successful. But also, should I focus my effort on different things? So I continue to get back up. I continue to build new things. I continue to push myself just by being a perpetual learner and just being somebody who's always looking for what's that next edge. Because I think as long as you're alive and you're doing great things and you're innovating and you're challenging yourself and you're building things, I think that's probably the proudest moment. So there isn't a check that has come in. There isn't a deal that I've closed and I'm like, oh, that's now a much more, like all of the successful companies, quote unquote, successful companies, the companies who have made money, have made a profit, I consider that a success, absolutely. But there's also been a lot of companies that have failed in the meantime, that haven't gone off, that were never successful, that never closed a client, that I had to shut down.
And what's the hardest call that you've had to make in that journey around that then? Has there been a moment where you've had to make a really, really tough decision? What would be the one that kind of sticks in your mind?
I would probably say, well, letting go of the last company was probably one of the hardest decisions. so the previous wave of what we had with this whole data thing was, I called it going from on-premise into the cloud, right? So that was the previous wave that we had, where we had all of these, especially within payments and within finance, a lot of the servers were in the back room, right? Or it was on a, we had an actual server room, and a lot of companies were working on that. And especially in payments, right? I can tell you stories of payments companies that it was really just a rack in the back of the room, and hopefully the internet doesn't go down and stuff. But that migration from building things on premise into the cloud and helping companies on that journey was definitely a great journey. And through all of that, I was always telling companies about the data science maturity model. That was one of the things that I didn't invent it, but I was really sort of like, hey, you're here right now. You want to be AI driven. You want to have all of that. So the vision was there. I was considering myself a data scientist way before the word was even popularized and stuff. But then eventually you get to a point where you've done a lot of those things, and then a ChatGPT comes out, and I'm not saying I didn't take it seriously, but there was a new wave coming, and then you're figuring out, do I stick on this wave or do I go on to the next wave? And I could have easily taken that company and said, we're just going to ride the next wave and just going to take that over, and we're not going to do on-prem to cloud migration anymore. We're only going to focus from, how do you build on that data warehouse and build AI stuff. And I think letting go of that company when we got the offer from like, hey, we want to buy your company, that was probably the hardest thing, where we said, okay, if we let this go, does that mean letting go of everything? And I think what helped me through all of that was actually the fact that I said, okay, I'm going to sell it. We ended up signing the deal. And then I started writing about everything that I've done in the last 20, 30 years, mostly 20 years, about everything that I've done in payments. And that was sort of like my cathartic process to deal with all of that. And that led to the new opportunity. So, yeah.
How do you balance kind of that vision? You mentioned there about you want to see the future alongside executing what you're currently trying to do now.
I think for me, having a vision, I don't want to say that I'm not one of those thinkers that I will sit down and I have the vision. I think what we see now is that there's so many great thinkers. There's so many smart individuals who are now more open. I don't know if that's the right way, but they're open in a way that they weren't open before. So if I think of an Elon Musk, or I think of a Sam Altman, or I think of the people that we now look up to as far as sort of like the geniuses of our generation. Go think back in the 80s and in the 90s and in the 2000s and stuff. Who were those people, and were they sharing at that level? Absolutely not.
It's that build in public thing, right?
Yeah, build in public, right? Yeah. Bill Gates wasn't having a podcast and was like, hey guys, we're building here at Microsoft. Or Steve Jobs wasn't doing it. Like 20 years later, you hear the stories about how Steve was working and his colleagues are telling all of these other things. And you're like, oh, you hear all of those things. But now we have the smartest people building things, amazing things, launching those things, and then sharing what they've built, or even open sourcing it, or giving away the patents like that Elon has done, so that others can build and actually become more innovative and stuff. So for me, creating a vision is not about convincing myself that I'm this smart. Absolutely not. I'm just reading a lot. I'm just seeing what others are doing. I'm researching a lot. And then I say, okay, through all of that, what's my framework? What are the things that I think I have enough experience in that I want to do? So what's my lens? And I look at that. Payments is definitely that one lens. Again, not the smartest person in payments, not by far. I can name you 50 people who are way better at the payments thing. But payments is something that I love and that I've enjoyed. Strategy is one of those things that I've always loved and always enjoyed, but I've had to learn how do you communicate strategy? How do you talk about that? And then data and AI is also something that I love. So I have these three lenses where I can go through, and I can say, okay, in the middle, where does the payment /strategy /AI things come in? And if I would talk to myself and I would explain it to myself, how would I do it? So when I write about it, when I post about it, it's not even about the audience, right? It's not saying, oh, I think my audience needs this. No, I'm saying I'm trying to figure out tokenization. I'm trying to figure out agentic commerce. I'm trying to figure out stablecoin infrastructure. Therefore, I read and study what others are doing, and I'm summarizing it for myself. And then I'm saying, okay, how do I feel about this? Or it's not even about how do I feel. What do I think is going to happen in the future with this? And then I communicate that, again, for myself more than for the audience, because I'm not trying to preach or say, hey, this is what it's going to be, but I'm sharing that. And then others can then take from that I can be a part of their research, but I'm expecting others to take it and then have their own opinions about that. And we can have great conversations about it.
You see it quite often, though, is that you may have an individual that is incredibly intelligent and they have a fantastic strategy in their head, but where the business ends up maybe not perform as well the way they want it to perform is they fail to communicate that strategy, right? And you can have good products, but if you're not bringing in, sometimes you need a team around you to help get that product out there in the right way. The business is never really going to reach that full potential.
Absolutely, yeah. I think those are skills that nowadays you need more than anything, right? It's I think you guys do an amazing job. It's like, how do you communicate not just the conversations, but the things? How do you dissect it and how do you share that, right? It's, are you able to take an idea? Doesn't matter if it's your idea or somebody else's idea. Are you able to take an idea, break it down in pieces, and communicate that with others, right? I used to remember times where we would have presentations and slide decks, and I had to learn myself the skill of saying, am I putting too much text on this slide? What is the idea? What am I trying to convince? What is my objective of what I'm trying to do? And I think nowadays you can have technical skills, you can have all these, you can have great degrees and stuff. But in most companies, it's about, hey, I think this is a vision, or the company has a vision. I'm taking this particular part of it. I have an idea of it, or I have multiple ideas over it, and I want to share that. Can I break that down into a presentation? Can I communicate that properly? Right? I've spent a lot of time trying to convince people in companies that we should go in a specific direction. And I failed a lot of times. And that was for the lack of communication. It wasn't for the lack of trying, but it was more like I wasn't able to convince them. I didn't have the arguments. I needed to go back. And I think nowadays we get tools like an AI, ChatGPT, all of those other things, as well as, strategy, handbooks, and all those other things that we can utilize to say, how do we bring those ideas to life and share those? But also, can we have other tools where we can build things out to show people what we're trying to do as well? And I think that's great for everything.
So if you could give an early stage founder trying to break into fintech one piece of advice, what would that one piece of advice be as we head into 2026 imminently?
I think for any founder, especially, I think if you're young, you're at such a great position. But even like, don't be afraid. Young to me doesn't mean you have to be 21. You can be 21 all the way up to 60 and you can be considered young. But I think going into 2026, it's understanding the history of fintech, financial services, but also understanding where are we currently at, right? So things like modular payments, the fact that people are doing more and more partnerships. It's understanding the encroaching technologies within our space, right? What is coming in that's impacting the industry into doing that. Once you have all of that, you have that lay of the land, basically. You understand what's going on, the technologies that are taking place. Because there's so many different companies, not just to mention the PSPs and the acquirers and the fraud engines, there's such a wide landscape. It's what can you put together as a company that it's going to create value for those who are either there, for the consumers, for the merchants, for the acquirers, for the issuers, that others are not working on. Why? Because a lot of them might be legacy. They might be, it's very difficult for them to do it. So I think if you're currently working on encroaching technologies, apply to the payments ecosystem that produce a level of value for the consumer, the merchants, the acquirer, the issuers, the schemes, whatever that may be, then that's probably a great foundation to start a company on.
Oh, really good. You mentioned briefly agentic commerce earlier. It's obviously a very hot topic right now and particularly poignant for the payments world and how they maybe go about dealing with what agentic commerce might become. What's your thoughts on that, particularly with the payment lens of this thing's coming, right?
Yeah.
We're going to be telling AI to go and do shopping for us, to book our holiday, to all this sort of stuff. If you're a payments company right now, how do you address the security challenges that might come with that, for one? Mm-hmm. And what would you be thinking about how you wrap it into your ecosystem? Because for me, you're at risk if you don't get it right early on, because the agentic commerce will then start saying, hey, this payment provider didn't like me last time. I'm not going back there again, right? You have this finite window to be like, we need to understand this thing and we need to be top of that list for the agentic that's doing the shopping, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the way that I'm currently looking at agentic commerce is that, indeed, it's undeniable. It's something that what we've seen with especially the LLMs and AI and generative AI sort of like going into, they're creating their own ecosystem. They're doing things for the consumer to, do better search, do find products, find services. And then that last step is, of course, doing the transaction. That's where we're in that space, as this is what agentic commerce is going to enable. The biggest thing in that is indeed authentication, right? How do I make sure that whoever this bot is, or whoever this agent is, do they have the actual authority and the authentication to be able to do those transactions? So as a payments company, I wouldn't place all of my, I wouldn't I wouldn't bet on just one protocol being there. I think now more than ever, you need to be on top of it. You need to study what's happening. You need to have an open mind as to who's introducing what, and not say, oh, because it's this party, we shouldn't look at it. No, everything is going to be out there. It's going to, at the end of the day, going to be, are consumers going to adopt to it? I think probably in the next 2 to 3 years, we'll see a nice rise of adoption within that. Then it's going to be the merchants. How are merchants going to react to that? Yes, all of them wanted to enable, because everybody wants to make more money. And if this will allow them to do it, absolutely. We're seeing Visa introduce a standard that merchants will have to adapt, right? Or will have to adapt, will most likely adapt, because it solves a problem, right? How do I identify that this agent is actually a trusted agent to actually come into my ecosystem and purchase something? Then we're seeing the likes of a Google with their protocols and building that out. So I think as a payments company, you need to look at each one of them. You need to look at the different layers. You need to have a good understanding of every single step of it. You need to have people who live and breathe that and are trying to say, hey, we're going to make this work. Because I think what I think a lot of payments companies don't understand is that just the way that an Apple Pay came in, Apple Pay was something that a lot of people were like, oh, crazy, it's happening. But it still took a decade to really get to that maturity level. But now it's non-negotiable.
And there's still gateways out there that don't accept Apple Pay.
Absolutely, right? There's still resistance, right? There's resistance, and it's not even a merchant resistance. It's oftentimes even an acquirer or a PSP resistance that's in there. But that adoption took 10 years. Then if we look at things like SoftPOS, right, which still took 5 years, and now we're seeing tokenization, which has been around for a very long time, but that we're now getting to a place where it's going to be mandated. I think with Agentic, what we're just going to see is that you can't just say it's going to be this one solution that's going to solve everything. Different players are going to contribute to it. OpenAI, Anthropic, everybody's introducing things within that space. They're creating standards, they're creating protocols. And instead of having this closed mindset, you're seeing that with like Anthropic launch MCPs, which is a model context protocol, which then allows you to access different sources and different data forms. And the whole industry went, great idea, let's go after it. And I think what we're now just seeing is that a lot of these companies who were always very proprietary, sort of like we have this thing, are now taking each part of it and trying to contribute a protocol, of course, hoping that they can claim that part. But if you're a payments company, you have to say, I have to work with everybody, right? I like some companies' approaches of just saying, we're in every conversation because every conversation matters, and you need to take that in. What I think will happen is eventually you'll have companies that are just saying, look, that's too much effort. So you'll have a company that say, hey, we're like an orchestrator for all of these agentic protocols. We're just going to build an SDK or everything on top of that layer. You integrate with us and we'll make sure that everything is there. You'll get those type of companies that are going to succeed with that in doing that. Yeah.
And I guess then just a couple of final questions as we wrap up. The next wave of AI-driven disruption, where's it coming from?
Yeah, so I think the next wave of AI and what we're seeing is, let me see. I think agentic commerce is definitely that next wave. The next wave that what we're going to see is that consumer adoption needs to take place, merchant adoption needs to take place. It's going to be a multi-wave type of effect for it to really get to that point. And even then, how far is that going to reach, right? As I'm having conversation with people, not everybody is willing to just say, oh, I'm just going to let my agent do all of these things. Things have been introduced in the last 12 to 6 months. New protocols are still coming out every single day. So I think agentic is definitely there. But if I overlook at what AI can actually do for us, I think if we're just looking at payments specifically, we're going to have to deal with fraud and risk a lot more, because it's not just the agentic, it's fraud attacks, it's impersonation, it's taken over, it's takeover accounts, it's all of those other things. So I think AI will enable a lot of the fraudsters already, right? They will do a lot more fraud. How do you protect against that? So there's going to be a lot more on that. So I actually think machine learning for me, right? So generative AI is one thing, agentic is another thing, but I think machine learning will have to also get much better.
Yeah.
And when I'm looking at that, I'm seeing some companies investing heavily now in their own GPU, like getting NVIDIA, sort of like getting AWS and NVIDIA sort of like to come in and build out their own foundational models that go end to end to be able to deal with risk, to deal with fraud, to deal with dynamic 3DS and all those other things. So deal with TRA exemptions. So how do I authenticate this, or how do I authenticate this? And then also authorization and dealing with that entire funnel end to end is where I think machine learning is going to get this new wave of acceptance, is saying, like, if I'm a payments company and I'm just thinking about the agentic side of it, that's not going to be enough.
Yeah, I think the fraud bit's really valid point. You know, the new evolution of what fraud through AI looks like, in essence.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Now, Dwayne, before we wrap up, we've got one of our favourite parts of the show.
Okay.
The shelf of shame. So we would like you to nominate something that maybe gives you a little bit of frustration in the payments world, and we agree if we put it on the shelf, never to be going into the payments world again, or you take it with you. What would be your ick in payments?
Ooh, that's a very challenging one. Well, I have to say that the thing that gives me a little bit of an ick is that we have this tendency, and especially like the more I talk to different payments companies, there are very smart individuals inside of a lot of these payment companies. You speak to them behind the scenes, you have great conversations that go really in depth, and they really know their stuff. But the ick that I have, and I've experienced it myself, that I felt like I know this stuff and I can actually do something with it. It's that we still have this very banking hierarchical mindset of saying the only person who can really say something for the sake of the company is the C-level executives, right? We're just letting the C-level is drafting blogs and having a vision and all these other things. And as I'm reading it, I'm like, you didn't write that, any of that. I think we need to get out of that space where great ideas, intelligence, new concepts are wrapped within these companies, and individuals don't have their opportunity to share that. I look at tech a lot, where if you go look at it, it's not, I see within tech, it's not the C-level who creates things, right? It's not the CEO, or it's not, you have you have an Elon Musk, you might be exceptional, but even he gives more credit to his teams, people that you might not know who are building things. I think payments needs to give a lot more people the opportunity to not just to be able to talk freely about things and come up with ideas and collaborate and
couldn't
come
agree
up with
more. I think that accessibility for people putting their, obviously we've been fortunate, the companies that we've worked at, we had some friction with it early on, I think, but we've generally been allowed to put our voice out there, and we've obviously climbed up the ladder from the types of roles that we sit in these days, but certainly when we started this journey we weren't that in that kind of really senior position. So yeah, it's a great one to nominate. First, thanks for coming in, Dwayne. Been great. Where can people find you? Where can they get in touch, find out more?
I think probably the best way, if you want to learn more about what I'm doing at the moment, or the thoughts and ideas that I have, go to LinkedIn. So Dwayne Gefferie, you can just easily find me as well. Follow, connect, DM me, whatever you want to do. The second thing would definitely be my newsletter. It's a Substack newsletter called Payment Strategy Breakdown. Every week, I try to every week at least post a very in-depth type of topic. I like to just sort of like give that as much as possible. And then I try to publish where I'm going to be at, what conferences I'm going to be at, as much as possible. But I'm very approachable. If people, I talk to people all the time. I probably have 10 to 20 different conversations with people from all parts of the payments ecosystem who either want to collaborate or who want to say, hey, we're working on a startup, I want some of your advice, or even larger companies are saying, hey, we want you to work on a project with us. And I tend to do that from time to time as well.
Bro, well, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.